Avina had me pinned to the ground. I could see a window not too far. If only I could make it to the window and jump just in time to ride the wave and not have it overtake me.
I was kind of excited for this year's camp in some ways because it was a chance to really try this. How can you take this idea and transform it into a writing context? And so I decided to do it. So I just took the framework of the airplane factory idea that wasn't really writing focus, and I came up with a different factory idea, and it was initially it was a character factory, but then it became like a narrative writing factory.
Yeah, we were broken up into 3 groups, and each group was a part or an aspect of the story.
And the descriptive kids were in charge of the setting. The really creative kids were in charge of crafting the characters, and the really organized kids were in charge of crafting the plot line.
And then we all thought of those parts of the story, and then they asked us to come together and combine all of what we had thought of. So like the characters that we had thought of went into the settings group. So our characters went into their setting and followed that group's plot.
We just started being like one group, and it got to the point where we just made one giant circle, because the point where everybody was getting up to go to the plots for chairs, and there was just a crowd around plot, and got kind of claustrophobic. So we just made it into our one thing.
After the first day, the teachers told us that they thought that we were actually onto something, and they wanted us to actually make a complete story. So we decided to abandon the old characters and make some new ones with the help of the other groups to flow with the plot and the setting.
Okay, I think it might be interesting for character development if they're all chosen for a specific thing that they're good at.
Yeah, like a navigator.
Yeah, like navigator or
Scout.
food gatherer, whatever. So
like in Hunger Games,
everyone had a strength. Yeah, and I kind of defined them as a character.
There wasn't really any guidelines like strictly that they gave us. They were kind of just like everybody just come together and work together, and I think that's what helped us like get our ideas out without feeling like restricted.
And evolve, and watching the kids really buy into it and latch onto it and want to keep that going, I think is the essence of what we're going for.
Okay, the end promotion was hope, because are we going in that?
I think so. I think that'd be good.
Because the whole point they're going to get the cure is because they have hope that it will cure everyone. So it's hope that's driving them to do whatever they're doing. So I think that should be an emotion.
And at first it was like we only had like little aspects, but then as we ended up bringing all 3 groups together, we were like, okay, well it doesn't really make sense to have this character be here, so let's take her out and put this person in instead. So that's kind of how we were collaborating.
Like 11 different people writing a story, and everyone, it was interesting to see everyone bouncing their ideas off of each other.
Interesting, but what if like we start with someone like just died, which is kind of brutal, but like someone just died, and now like we start with the aftermath of like the one death, and so like the beginning of the story could be like all the characters reacting to that and then realizing the danger of the situation, and then we can go from there. That's just a thought. So.
What I like about it is it makes the thought process that goes into writing very, very, very transparent. So instead of that internal dialogue where you're like, well, I like this for this character, but that doesn't really work, you actually get to see it play out in dialogue. And
who do you want to die?
That's kind of
let's start with there. Who do you want to die?
Yeah, it's kind of an abrupt
Just like an idea, so.
Well,
I think that would be interesting because then we could see how that impacts the characters and kind of show that side of them and kind of get to know them in terms of a disaster has just happened, how do they react, and I think that could be really good for character development.
And also the person who dies should be like an extra character that we don't have to develop that well because he dies in the first part.
Yeah, we don't have to use one of the characters that we chose yesterday. We could add another one.
And then after that, we ended up deciding on a timeline on how our story was. The first chapter, this was going to happen, and then by the end, this was going to be the end result, and then we had to figure out all the parts in between, and then each person working in a group, so we were a team, we each took a chapter to write, so we ended up having 6 chapters.
The whole entire group spent on the timeline was about 2 hours, because we made it over a couple of days. Yeah, that's how unorganized we were, to make one simple timeline over a couple days.
We know this is post-apocalyptic, so what would it be like? Are there what kind of conditions do they live in? Is it like tents, or is it actual buildings, or?
You learn the necessities of a story when you're writing them together, because when you don't have them, the whole thing falls apart basically.
To represent structure, like what we said, order and chaos, it'd have to be developed.
Yeah, it would have to.
It would have to be developed, because if it's not developed, then it's just as chaotic. Well, not just as chaotic, but it's not true order.
We didn't even really know that it would end up becoming a story that we were all working on together. We kind of just felt like it was an exercise to help us learn about the different aspects of a story, and it kind of evolved from there. And it was really cool to see how we could go from just 3 groups working on totally different parts of a story to making this whole complex plot that worked out really well.
Yeah, the writing process is about all of those, taking all those different pieces and making them work together.
I used to think that they were really separate, different parts of a story, and you would develop your characters and then do the setting and then the plot. It was cool for me to see how related those are and how a story depends on each aspect, and it's all connected.